Hello, Wake Up New Zealand. Carol Sakey speaking. Well, just recently, the deputy leader of ACT Party introduced into Parliament a motion as to the genocide of Muslims and other religions, of Chinese people, a million or so Chinese people being held in detention camps in China. The motion was passed unanimously, but what actually led up to that motion and what actually happened, because this just recently happened when there was a lot of pressure coming from UK Parliament as they were doing the same thing, as there was huge evidence that there was torture, rapes, forced sterilizations and abortions, huge genocide in communist China. But this has been known for decades and it still goes on. So for the United Nations, what about there? Well, China is sitting on four major UN agencies, and the human rights around human rights, the Security Council, UN Security Council, actually deals with human rights abuses globally. The problem there being is that China has been rewarded veto rights. So every time anything comes up about this genocide or cruel action, terrible, terrible, monstrous action that the Communist Chinese government does to the Chinese people, that is then pushed to one side because of these veto rights and never goes anywhere else. And China is a permanent member of the UN. Therefore, nothing is going to change there. And they just keep on, the UN just keep on giving and giving and giving to Communist China. The UN fits like hand in glove to Communist China. So let's look on our own shores. We have Helen Clark, who was actually on the UN as a member of the UN, who actually played an important role at the UN, who actually was part of funding Hamas terrorist organization, and she was called accountable for that. And did we hear about that in the newspapers here? No. When John Keyes was in, he was talking to the Communist Chinese leader, and when Helen Clark applied for the last leadership job of the UN, Communist China's leader actually told John Key publicly, advertising that Helen Clark was a good one for the job. So they publicly announced that. And when it came to Tedros getting into his leadership role with the World Health Organization, the UN, again, Communist China became involved in collaborating with several third world countries to elect Tedros in. And as we say, Tedros and the World Health Organization hand in glove stuff. So it doesn't matter what China does, there it sits. And China has approximately 8,000 peacekeeping troops in the UN. So also in November 2019, they introduced the first Chinese digital yuan to the UN, to the world actually. Whether they believe that could replace the American dollar, it probably was in their mind. The other thing is that in October 2019, all before the COVID started, Russia and China went to the UN with a 3-page document that sought globalized censorship of cyberspace, the internet. Well, in December 2019, the UN agreed to that, and they pre-planned coming back in August 2020 to set the references, etc., to take the next step. And that's how it is. So, on May the 5th, the CCP, it was said in Parliament, in New Zealand Parliament, after this pressure coming from Britain, the Tory party, calling New Zealand out, the New Zealand Prime Minister out, Ardern, that she was actually pulling back from the Five Eyes alliance, that she needed to step up. Australia was on her back. There was Nania Mahuta telling Australia when they tore up their trade agreement with China that Nania Mahuta said to them, have more respect for the CCP. So you can just imagine what was these Five Eyes alliances were thinking. Part of the Five Eyes, the other four alliances, were thinking about what was happening with New Zealand government under Ardern. So Ardern, Nana Mahuta, had publicly said that relationship between the CCP and New Zealand, she called it a friendly cultural relationship, just like the mythical Taniwha and the Red Dragon. And that's what she portrayed to the world. So, Australian government, after they tore that up, and things are really heating up there and things are not looking good. Of course, everyone is concerned about what's happening in the South China Seas, and things are hotting up there, and watching what's happening with the CCP and Taiwan. And yeah, things are not looking good. Yes, China still seems to do very well in its economically, even though they started with the so-called COVID-19. So it's quite concerning how Nania Mahuta has described our relationship with the CCP. And when the Deputy Leader of ACT introduced this motion into Parliament to act upon, and these discussions took place around the genocide of Chinese people in China, it appears that what ACT looked for first originally did get watered down substantially. So Ardern said that the final motion that they concluded on was strong and clear. But that's not true. It's not strong and clear, because they even wanted to add, they added the word possible human rights, possible, when it's evidential that it is genocide. So anyhow, Deputy Leader of the ACT Party came back, got that possible removed. So they're saying, well, look, it's an extremely difficult situation. They're talking about trade here. So the government has been called upon to use the relevant tools of international law. Well, international law, when it comes to human rights abuses, you get to talking about the UN Security Council, where China has power of veto, where nothing ever happens, where all they get is rewarded for their monstrosities of actions against Chinese people. It's horrendous. So the UN produces international laws. The UN Security Council is internationally responsible to attend to human rights abuses, and it fails miserably. UN fails miserably. So instead, the UN, they just reward the CCP. So you're talking about rapes, forced sterilizations, forced abortions, horrific tortures, and 1 million or so people in detention camps. And the UN collaborating with the CCP, New Zealand collaborating with the CCP. So recently we had troops, Chinese police actually training with Manukau police on our shores. So this is how it's getting. We are really, really becoming hand in glove with China now. So at party, they said that the original motion they put into Parliament was softened, it was weakened, and they were very disappointed in how it had come out. And yet Ardern said it was strong and clear. So the word genocide was taken out of the motion, whereas in England, it remained in there. So the final motion that passed unanimously by the government was a huge disappointment for the Chinese workers who actually reside in New Zealand. And these poor people who reside in New Zealand don't even feel safe anywhere in the world, let alone on New Zealand shores. They can't go anywhere without feeling safe because they know that they can be kidnapped and taken back to mainland China, or if they speak out and show their identity, then their family in China can be harmed or possibly killed, thrown into these detention camps. And it's a very fearful situation for them. So anyone who speaks up from this group of people is very courageous, but as I say, they're so fearful to even show who they are. So the ACT Party said what the governing party, which is Labour, did was intolerable, because what they did is they softened what motion ACT Party originally put in. They took out the word genocide and they put in there human rights abuses. So one Urker man, when he knew what the conclusion was in Parliament after the motion, he said, "It's the darkest day for New Zealand democracy. Trade has taken over freedom and human rights in New Zealand. By Jove, it has." And we all know it has. He said it's questionable whether New Zealand government will ever call the CCP out for genocide. And that's true, because they are not calling them out, because again Ardern is saying it's up to international laws, the UN Security Council, back again to the CCP. So this is reputable evidence that they have. We're talking about of millions of lives. And as this Uyghur person said, they do not have time to sit around and wait for an independent assessment. So this final conclusion of the Xinjiang motion was unanimously agreed upon, was just a soft option. So the House is gravely concerned about the severe human rights abuses taking place against Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minorities in the Xinjiang Uyghurs Autonomous Region. And that's what it said. Human rights. It was totally huge. Human rights. They did not say genocide. And this is genocide. So New Zealand Human Rights Council, back to them. The New Zealand government is just the long arm of the UN, founder of the UN. Stalin attended the very important meeting called the Yalta meeting in Tehran, Iran, with Roosevelt to set up the UN. Stalin, who killed millions of his own, starved them to death and tortured them. And, and this is the UN, that is the one world government that is ruling the world, is telling us how to shape our lives, and our government is going along with it because they are them. They're the long arm of the UN. So the UN boasts that's going to stop wars right across the world. We've never had so much civil unrest ever. And it's civilians, populations of civilians opposing state totalitarian governments. Authorization from the top down to control people. Can people globally, populations globally, it appears that every government, every UN member nation has a socialist, Marxist, or communist dictatorship, crushing people from the top down. The UN doesn't say anything about Chop Chop Square, Saudi Arabia, or how gays are thrown off of roofs, yet they talk about LGBT and they talk about gender, women, girls, children. It's bullshit. So you have evidential reports on massive live organ harvesting in China of those people who practice Falun Gong. This is a meditation, a whole of body experience where they feel that it actually gives them a spiritual well-being. And the CCP feel threatened by that. So all these people who fear and who have had live organ harvesting, a live organ harvesting data bank where they give out the price of each organ, what you can buy them for, and advertise that over the world, right across the world. You pre-order your organ and then go and get it, be operated on in communist China. It's like a nightmare story. So the CCP and Russia and their 3-page document. Global censorship of the internet, eh? So what are they going to do? Try and stop you from talking about what is truly happening today. And China is very involved, as are the World Economic Forum, the UN, and every leader of every UN member state in the world. There is not one that is not on the same page of controlling populations around the world. So what we've got is a global social credit system of punish and reward. And this is what's happening right now. So what's the next crisis going to be? I believe it's going to be massive food shortages, and that is going to come about not because third world countries can't produce food, it's because of the corrupt leaders of these countries that are rewarded by the UN, by the World Bank, by the IMF. It's about targeting farmers globally in New Zealand, getting them off their land so that they can bring in GM foods, say, look, we've got a starving world now because, look, we've got no farmers, they're all gone. We've got them all off their land on purpose, deliberately. We better sow some GM crops because they grow really fast, and we've got to save the billions of the world, save us all from starvation. It's like the vax. Oh, we've got a global virus. It's a huge crisis. Never mind that 2010, 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, 18, 19, the UN Global Strategic Plan for Global Vaccinations. Go and look at it, people. Go on the UN website and have a look. every year. This year, do you know what? Since the COVID came about, more people died of SARS-1 that are supposed to be dying of SARS-2. And how come all of a sudden, within months, 51% less people are dying of malaria in India? And what happened to the flu? Is COVID so magical? And don't tell me it's because you've been in lockdown. Because how many weeks have you been in lockdown over the last year? Really? No. When I've said this to people, they said, oh, because we wore our masks, because we were in lockdown. That is rubbish, 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 rubbish. Bullshit. So, when the CCP says jump, everyone jumps, including the UN. And has the UN ever stopped wars? We've got the worst war going on ever right now. It's not about countries fighting each other. It's about states controlling populations, about introducing into countries globalized, corporate, wealthy, corporate bodies, corporations, to partner with governments where governments will make legislations so that they reward these global corporations. Those that will bring in, that have got their big data, big pharma that we've got now, and GM foods, Masada. And Gates, he has invested in a lot of land. He's invested in Masada, GM foods, and that's how it is. So people, please wake up. It's all about controlling every part of your life. Every part. In Parliament, you rely on to survive. Food, water, roof over your head, shelter, air, and transport to get around. And every one of those is becoming centralised. Centralised by a two-tier system, Crown and iwi. Only a very minute part of Maori, elite iwi, all having something to gain. Follow the money, follow the power, follow the status. And iwi having veto rights over the Crown. It's all happening before our eyes. It's happening now. You got the repeal of the Resource Management Act. Farmers, they're targeting farmers to get off their land. They're making it really difficult for them. Very difficult. You've got the Three Waters Reform Plan, where you've got the regional councils giving the assets and liabilities to 5 giant entities that are going to be controlled by iwi Maori. You've got the Auckland City Council with the UN Habitat 3 plan that controls everyone, urban, city, control your power, control your water. Now, when the farmers are off their land, they will control your food, because then the farmers have got to look for food themselves. So they'll be reliant on GM foods too. And the air we breathe, climate alarmism. It is bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. Wake up, people. Don't be sheeple, people. Thank you. Please share, 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 and subscribe.